Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use custom TableView cells to populate your TableView. We're just going to start with a blank project again and get our TableView set up. And then we're going to create a custom TableView cell that you can use in your TableView to display your content. So to get started, we'll just create our TableView first. And we know that this is going to have a frame of 0 and a plain style. And then we'll go ahead and create our private extension down here where we're going to actually do our setup of the code. So we'll say setup view here. And we'll set our background color equal to white for now. And then we'll need to call this function right here in setup view. Okay, so we're going to be using auto layout. So we're going to translate our auto resizing mask into constraints equal to false. We'll add this to our view, and then we're going to set our constraints here. This will be a little bit of review if you just watched the previous video on how to add a table view. Looks like I misspelled this here. Is active is what it should be. Trailing anchor dot constraint is equal to the view's trailing anchor. And our bottom anchor is going to be equal to our view's safe area layout guide bottom anchor. All right, let's go ahead and change this up here and build and run it. And I think our table view should be on the screen. We'll see what it looks like here. There we go. So we've got our table view there, nothing's in it. Let's go ahead and finish setting it up. So we know that we're going to be using an automatic row height. So we'll set the estimated 1 to 52. And the row height is equal to UI TableView.automatic dimension. And then we also need to set the delegate and the data source. Now we're going to have an error because this class doesn't conform to that yet, to our delegate and data source. We're going to do that now. UI TableView delegate and UI TableView data source. Our number of sections, we'll just have a single section. Number of rows, we'll have 50 rows. And our cell for row index path and our did select row index path. We'll go ahead and put in this deselect method at index path. And again, this is a little bit of review. We covered this in the previous video, so that's why I'm moving a little bit quicker through this part. So we also in the previous video created an extension, and it's an extension of UI table view cell. And remember, we do this so that we can have a function to call for the reuse identifier instead of hard coding that in everywhere that we need it. So this is a class function called reuse identifier. This will return a string. So we will just return a string describing self. Okay. And then just for the sake of getting this kind of set up the rest of the way, we will have to register a class. We're going to register UI TableView cell.self for the reuse identifier off of UI table view cell. Then in here we can say let cell equals table view DQ reusable cell with identifier for index path. And so again, this will be the reuse identifier here, index path, and then we'll just return the cell. And we'll say cell.textLabel.text equals hello world. Okay, we build and run this. We should be pretty close to where we left off in our previous video. And yeah, looks good. We've got 50 rows and they all say hello world. So this video is really about making a custom cell that gives us more flexibility. Maybe we want more than just 1 or 2 lines of text on there. Maybe we want an image on there. And that's kind of what we're going to show you how to kind of get set up today. And then in the second part, or later on, we'll show you how to actually implement that in a project with a more complex custom cell for the newsfeed. So the first thing we need to do is create a new class for our cell. So we'll call this feed cell. It'll create a new file here. We're going to import UI kit, and this will be a class named feed cell, and it is a subclass of UI table view cell. So what that means is that in our view controller, instead of registering a plain old UI table view cell, we actually want to register our feed cell. So we'll change this out to be feed cell here and here and here. Now the cool thing is because we've defined this function in our extension, it exists on all subclasses of UI table view cell. And that's one of the big reasons why we do that. So there we have a reuse identifier, and that should be almost everything we'll need to do here. We will need to do some additional setup down here. So we're going to take this line off in order to make this all work and come together. If we were to build and run this right now, I think we would just see a bunch of empty cells. Yep. So let's go ahead and start customizing our cell. So within a cell, there's several functions that we can override. There's really 2 that we really care about though. First one is called prepare for reuse, and then we're going to say superview.prepare, not superview, but super.prepare for reuse. And we'll put a little comment here to prepare for reuse. What that means is that every cell gets reused. When it disappears off the screen and reappears at the bottom, it's being reused, which means if we set some text on a cell and we don't reset it with something else, then it may show up in the wrong place. And then we're going to have some bugs and issues around where things are showing up. So that's the first thing we're going to want to do, is implement that. The second one is we're going to override an initializer. And then we'll call super.init. And the style, we'll just pass these in. Reuse identifier. This gets called automatically. Then you can see that we have an error here. We'll go ahead and click fix. This is required. We're not using a nib file or an exib file. We're just laying everything out in code, and which is why we display a fatal error here. This initializer should not be used. So similarly to how we do our view controllers, we're going to create a private extension of feed cell with a function in here to set up our view. And we're going to call that from within this initializer. So it's important to know that in the setup view, we don't want to put code that we're going to be setting like the values on the screen. Instead, this is just where we're laying it out. We will have another one here that will I typically call it configure. You'll see it named different things, but this is the function that gets called to put your content on the screen. So Okay, this will all make sense. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we want to add is a label. So we'll say private let name label equals UI label. So we have created a constant of name label up here. In setup view, we'll say this translates auto resizing mask into constraints is equal to false. We'll set the font equal to a UI font dot system font of size 14 regular, and then we'll add it to the view. Now cells have something called a content view. Some people will do something like this and just say add subview, but we actually want to add this to the content view. So we'll say content view dot add subview, and we'll add the name label to there. Now we need to set the constraints on it. So we'll say the top is equal to our content view dot top with a constant of 15. So it's going to be down 15 from the top. And we'll do our leading anchor content view dot leading anchor, and again we'll set the same constant to 15 here equals true. And let's set the height, and this is going to be equal to constant. We'll set it to a constant height of 18. And then let's add a second label called time label. And in here, it's going to be very similar. I think we'll just copy this and paste it here so we can show you how this works. So we have a time label. Maybe we'll make it a smaller font and maybe a little lighter. And instead of the height being this, we'll set this to a height of 14. We'll leave the leading anchor fine. We still want it 15 from the left, but we want to place this below our name label. So this is going to be name label dot bottom, and we only want it maybe 2 points down from the bottom of the name label. And then the last thing that we want to set here on the time label is its bottom anchor, and it will be equal to the content view's bottom anchor. Oops. But it will have a negative 15 constant. That means it's going to be coming up from the bottom. There will be a space between the bottom of the time label and the bottom of the cell of 15 points. So that's how we set it up. The next step is to configure it. So we're going to pass in a couple of values here. And all we need to do is say name label.text equals name and time label.text equals time. So now when this function gets called, it will set these labels. Every time it creates a new cell, it will call setup view and lay out our view for us. So let's go back into our view controller. We're almost done setting this up. We're getting a cell here, and we know that we just created this function here called configure, and we're using this reuse identifier. But you'll find that if you try to access it, it doesn't exist. In fact, if we look at the type of cell this is here, this is still a UI table view cell, and we need a feed cell. So a common way to do this is with a guard statement or an if statement. In this case, we will just use an if statement. So we're going to say if let cell equals cell as a feed cell. So all we're doing here is saying if we can cast or transform this cell into a feed cell, then we'll do what's inside of here. Otherwise, we'll just return the cell. And now if you look in here, we do have a type of feed cell where we can call configure. We'll say 15 minutes ago. So if we build and run this, I think it will start to show up on our table view the way that we'd like it to. Yep, there we go. So you can see we've got our custom cell, and we have a couple of labels, the name label and the time label sitting there. And our constraints have given us a padding of 15 on each side. And I think it looks pretty good. Now you may notice if you look closely, it looks like the separator inset is just a little off. So what we'll do there is on our table view, we can actually control that with the separator inset property. This will just be equal to a UI edge insets. And we set the left to be 15, which is the same distance or padding that we gave our labels on our cell. And there we go. Now everything's nice and lined up there with a 15-point border or gap there on the left side. You could call it a margin, you can call it padding, but it's the same all the way down. And that's how you set up a custom cell. And now we're in our social media app project. And we're going to be implementing a custom TableView cell for our feed. So right now our feed looks like this. We're going to replace these cells with a custom cell and custom layout here that will actually look like this when we're all done. We're going to have a whole bunch of these cells and it's going to look great. So let's jump right in and get started. We already have our table view set up and we already have our extension set up right here. So the next thing we need to do is create our cell. What I like to do is within this home directory for this tab, I like to create another group or folder called cells, and that's where I have all the cells live. So we'll go ahead and create this one. This is just going to be for text only. So if somebody posts some content but it's only text, we'll use this particular cell. So we're going to say feed text only cell. That's our name. Then inside here we'll import UIKit. We'll create our class, which will be a subclass of UI TableView cell. We will override our prepare for reuse function and say super.prepare for reuse. And we will also override our initializer here and just passing in style and the reuse identifier that came in with the function header here. And then it will throw a warning or an error. We'll just hit that and hit fix to put the code in that we need. Now we'll create our private extension here for the feed only text cell. We'll create our function called setupView. And then after this super.init is called is when we will call setupView. So if we look closely at this, it does look quite a bit different from this currently. The background color is different, and the cell actually has some padding or a margin outside of its edges here. So to achieve that effect, we're going to need to set our background color. And there's a couple of ways to do this. Let's take a look at what the color is here. 243. And you can, so there's third-party libraries that let you just put in hex values. Apple's system does not by default just let you hard code the hex values in your code. You can do it through the assets folder, and we might just set something up to do that, just a helper function to do that. So I think that's probably the route that we'll take here. So to do that, what we'll need to do is in our assets folder, well, first let's grab the hex color here. So this will be our background color. I'll just copy that. we'll come over here into our assets, and anywhere in this white space, you can also click on this plus button. I just right click over here and select color set. And then this is going to bring up a color and the two different colors here for any appearance or for if you're going to support dark mode. Do is create a custom color, and then we're going to actually add a new extension to help us use those colors throughout the application. So this one is our primary background color, so I'm going to go ahead and name this background color, and I did that just by double tapping over here. Oh, there it goes. Okay, and then for any appearance, what we can do is we select any appearance, come over here to the show color panel, and we just paste in our hex value that we copied from Sketch and hit enter. And I'm going to leave the dark appearance alone for now. We could look at supporting that later. But that's all you need to do in the assets folder. Let's go ahead and create our new extension. This will be a new Swift file, and it will be an extension of UI color. So we're going to import UI kit. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create an enum. And I'm going to call it asset color name, because this is the name of a color in our assets folder. It will be a string and it will be codable. So for the first one, it's going to be our background color. And this part is important. It needs to match what we wrote in our assets folder here. So this name right here needs to match this name right here. Case sensitive, spacing, and everything. Okay. And we would do that for every color that we end up adding to our project that we want to be able to access this way. So then let's write the extension. This will be the extension of UI color. And it's going to be a static function. That means that we can just call it without having to create an instance of UI color first. So this will be a color, an underscore, color name, and this will be the asset color name. The reason I do an underscore here is that it makes it so that when we call the function that it doesn't actually have the parameter name listed there in the function. It's kind of handy, and it helps to save some space in your code. So that's why I did that here. We're going to return a UI color. So if let color equals a UI color named our color name dot raw value. So that gets the string representation of it because this initializer takes a string. Then we're going to return the color. If it doesn't, we want to throw a fatal error here. This color doesn't exist. And we will say color name dot raw value. So if somebody, tries to call this function and the color doesn't actually exist in our assets folder yet, then it would throw a fatal error with this message here. If it does exist, then it would just return the color for us. And now we can see this in action. If we come back into our home controller, this is where we're going to want to set this in several places, but our home controller will be the first. We'll want to change the view.background color to our color.background color. This is the name of our function and then the name of the color that we're going to use. We also want to do the same thing for our table view. The table view.background color should equal our new background color. And then the table view has a background view as well. And it has a background color that we're going to want to set. That's almost everything. And I say almost because we still have this feed text only cell here, and we need to set the background color on that as well. So in here, in our setup view function, we can say background color equals dot color dot background color. And then this also has a content view. So we would say content view dot background color equals dot color dot background color. Almost there. We need to replace our code that was registering a plain TableView cell with the new TableView cell, with our feed text only cell. And we can do that by copying and pasting and replacing some text. And then we're going to erase this line here. We won't need that. And let's build and run this and see if our background color is now matched with what we need it to be for our design. It looks like it. You can tell it's just a little bit darker than the white that we have for the navigation bar and the tab bar. In this design, though, we also will not need these lines, all these table view separators. So we can get rid of those pretty easily. We just add a line here that says TableView.SeparatorStyle equals .none. So there won't be any separators on there anymore. There we go, just a blank view. And if we compare that over here, it looks pretty close to our color that we need to use. So we'll go for that. So the next thing is with our cell. And we can see that by default, cells were stretching to the edge of the screen, but our cell doesn't. So how are we going to accomplish that? We're actually going to put a UI view inside of the cell first before we add any of these labels or images. And we're going to have it be an inset. So I can select this here and press Option. It looks like it's going to be a 12 inset from both edges. And in fact, if I copy this and paste it down here real quick, let's take a look and see what kind of a distance we might need in between cells. So we'll just look at the shadow. The shadow is a 6. So I think what we'll end up doing is putting a space of about 14 probably in between the cells. So that means we're going to need 7 on the top and on the bottom and 12 on the left and the right, because as you build these out, this will have 7 on the top, this will have 7 on the bottom. That creates our space of 14. So we'll go ahead and do that now, and then we can see it load up here on the simulator. So in our cell, we are just going to create our container view equals UI view. And then in here, we're going to container view dot background color. It will be white. Oh, but before we do that, we're using auto layout everywhere. Translates auto resizing mask into constraints will be equal to false here. Okay. Then we can say content view dot add subview. We're going to add our container view. And then we'll go ahead and set our constraints. So the container view dot leading anchor dot constraint will be equal to the content view's leading anchor with a constant of 12, I think is what it was. Yep, 12 from the edges. And we'll say is active equal to true. And the same is going to be true for the trailing anchor. It will be equal to the trailing anchor of the content view, but it will have a negative 12. So now if we were to build and run this, I don't think it actually will show up on the screen because we don't have a width or a height or top or bottom defined yet. So it still just looks plain old. So the next thing we're going to need to do is add our top and bottom. So we'll add the top anchor. It'll be equal to our content view's top anchor, but it will be down from the top 7 points. And then our bottom anchor will be equal to the content view's bottom anchor, and it'll be moved up from the bottom. 7 points. I don't think it will still show on the screen yet. We need to have something inside of it, I believe, to have it show up. But for the sake of seeing if it's even there, we can actually set a height temporarily of about 100. And I think doing that will cause it to show up on the screen. Let's take a look and see. There we go. So you can see we have spacing on the left and on the right and in between each one. And as we scroll, they show up there. So it doesn't quite look like what we need it to. We need some rounded edges and a drop shadow. So let's see what the edges are rounded to here. Looks like they're rounded to 6. So that's pretty easy to do. We can just say container view dot layer dot corner radius is equal to 6. And if we build and run that, we should see the corners now rounded. Yep, the corners are all now rounded. But for the drop shadow, I went to Google for this, and I've actually used this quite a bit, this particular extension. So I'm just going to copy this, pop back over into my project, and I'm going to create a new file under the extensions folder called CA Layer. And I'm going to paste this right in here. And I will need to import UI kit because we are using a UI Bezier path as well as some other UI elements. So what this does is it just allows you to create your shadow exactly the way that it's done in Sketch. It's pretty handy. So let's go ahead and grab our color here. This looks like it's got an alpha of 30. So, and this is a new color, so we'll come here into our assets. We'll right click over here, do a color set, and this will be our shadow color. For any appearance, we'll show color panel and we'll paste the hex right into there. Now you'll notice it set the opacity to 100%, but this should be 30% to match our sketch design here. This color was 30%. And then we should be able to copy this and go into our UI color extension. We're going to need to add a new case here. And that's all we need to do. Now we can use it in the project. So we'll go back into our feed text to cell here, and we can say container view dot layer dot apply sketch shadow, and the color will be our shadow color. The alpha, this is the alpha of the actual shadow itself, and it's set at 100%, so it'll just be 1.0. The X is 0, the Y is at 2, the blur is at 6, and the spread was at 0. Let's see if that puts our drop shadow on the view for us. There we go. So now we have a nice drop shadow, and we've got our cells, and they look pretty good so far. Pretty close to our design. So now we're going to start adding all of the elements that go inside of there, starting with this picture. So first let's grab this picture actually, and we'll pull it out so we can actually have it show up for us. We'll just export selected. We'll drop that in our downloads. Come over here into our assets. There we go. This is just a stock photo that we found on Pexels. So will be our fake placeholder image. And so let's go ahead and set up our image view. So our first thing here in our feed text only cell is our image view, but I'm going to call it a profile image view. This will show the profile picture of the person who created the content, and it will be a UI image view. And down here, I think we can get rid of this line. We will say, well, let's keep it around till we finish building out the view. So profile image view dot translates auto resizing mask into constraints will be equal to false. Profile image view dot content mode will be to aspect fill, and then we'll add it to the content view. A couple other properties that we want to set is the corner radius, layer.corner radius, and I think this is the size of this is 46, so we'll set it to 23, so it'll be a circle. And we need to masks to bounds. So what this means is that if the image is bigger than the frame of the image view, it will clip it off, so it will keep us a nice rounded looking photo. Without it, it could spill over and you'd have sharp edges, and it probably wouldn't look very good. So then we need to set the constraints. So our top anchor, oh, I just made a mistake. We won't be adding this to the content view. This gets added to our container view. So I'm glad I caught that. Okay, so this is going to be in our container view. It looks like it's just inset 14 from the top and the left. So this will be the container view dot top anchor, and it'll be inset by 14. And the leading anchor will be the same as the container view's leading anchor, but again offset or inset by 14. So that will define its position. We need to set its width and height. So the width was this, and it was 46. And the height is also 46. Now, if we were to go ahead and build this, you won't see the image on there. And that's because by default, it's transparent if there's no image set on it. And we haven't written our function yet to configure this cell. So I think this might be a good time for us to do that so that we can see the content as it lays out. So we're going to call func configure. And for now, we'll leave it empty. But the first thing we'll want to do here is set the image property. And that's not the name of the image. The name of the image is fake placeholder. And then we need to be able to call this configure method. So back in our home controller, in our self-arrow index path, we'll say if let cell equals cell as the feed text only cell, then I can call this configure method on it. So let's build and run that and see what we've got. All right, it looks like we have a profile photo showing up on the cells, so that's fantastic. Let's add this name next. It looks like it's just 16 from the top and 14 from the photo. So in our feed text only cell, we'll go ahead and we'll create our name label. It'll be a UI label. And we'll say name label dot translates auto resizing mask into constraints equal to false there. That again, that's because we're using auto layout. And we'll set the font equal to a system font. Looks like 17 semi-bold, and it's not quite black, so we're going to take this color and create a new color probably. So 17 semi-bold, I think is what it was. Yep. So this is a good time. I copied the color value here, the hex value, so I'm going to go over to our assets folder. We're going to create a new color set. This will be our primary text color. And for any appearance, we will paste in our value here. It's almost black, it's pretty dark. But then we need to take this value here, copy it, come into our UIColor.swift extension and create a new case. Primary text color is equal to our primary text color. Now we can use it in our project. So we'll say namelabel.textColor equals .color dot primary text color. And then we're going to add this to our container view, just like that. And then we'll set the constraints. We don't actually need a width constraint for this one, but we do need a top leading and a height, and optionally a right anchor. So I think we'll get rid of this one. So let's take another look here at our code. It looks like the height was 20. So we can change this to 20. I need to change the properties. Okay, so this is the name label's top, leading, and height. So the top of the name label was 16. The leading anchor, now you could set it all the way out to the edge here. I think most people, myself included, prefer to set it based on the element that it's next to. So it looks like it's 14 points to the right of our profile image. So that means the leading anchor is going to be equal to the trailing anchor of the profile image view by just 14 points. So we're going to move it 14 points to the right of the trailing anchor on the profile image view. Then we have the height, and I want to set also our trailing anchor. And it looks like this one, we don't have this button set up here yet. So I think we can go kind of guess where this is going to be. So this is 48 plus 4 is 52 plus 8 for padding. It would be 60. So we'll set it to be 60. Container view dot trailing anchor -60. And I do that because if somebody has a really long name, I don't want it to spill over into this button. So I want it to stop about here. Okay, so we've got the name label set up. Let's go ahead and put that up here. And we're going to set this text in here in our configure function, which is called from our home controller. In a future video, I'm going to show you how to populate this with real data from an array of objects. So, but looks like we've got the name on there. Looks pretty close. That's looking pretty good, I think. Let's go ahead and get this button added. So I'm just going to check a property here. This looks good. Okay, so we're going to take this button and we'll make it exportable for iOS. We'll export that to our downloads. And then we'll come over here into our assets. And we will take these 3 images that it created and we'll just drop them over here. Let's rename this to our more button. Just like that. So now back in our feed text cell here, we're going to create a button up here. We'll name it more button, and it'll be a UI button type.roundedRect. It's pretty common, probably one of the most common types of UI buttons in iOS. Then down here, we'll go ahead and get it set up. So we'll say more button translates auto resizing mask into constraints equal to false. We're going to set the image, and this will be a UI image named more button. But we're going to add this with rendering mode on here, .always original, so it doesn't change the color on us or add some weird background state. And this will be for a normal control state. And then we can add this to our container view. Just like that. And then let's double check the design. I think it was it's 48 by 48 and it's inset by 4. So we can actually take this stuff right here. I'm going to copy that and paste it down here. Replace these with the more button. And then we'll just go through it. So the top anchor is equal to the containers view dot top anchor, but it was only down by 4 points. Yep. And then we're not setting the leading here, we're setting the trailing anchor. It's going to be equal to the container view's trailing anchor, and this will be a -4. It'll be inset from the right just by 4 points. And then the width and height were actually 48 for each of those. So let's go ahead and build that, and we should see our more button show up on the top right. There it is. And when you click on it, it kind of fades for just a minute there to indicate that it is a button. So it's looking good. Okay, let's add the time label that shows up right here underneath their name. And it looks like it's going to be a UI label. And it uses the same color, but its alpha is set. So we can actually reuse the same color that we already have in place. We can just set the alpha value on it. So let's go ahead and add that up here. We'll create a new label called time label equals UI label. And then we're going to go ahead and add it down here. Now we could copy, in fact I think I will just copy what we did for the name label here and paste it down. I'm actually going to paste it right underneath the name label. And we'll change these to time label just to save ourselves a little bit of time. And our font size on here was 14 regular. And the UI color was the primary text color. We can do this .with alpha component so that we can set the alpha value. And it looks like it was 40%. So it'll be 0.40. Our top anchor is going to be below the name label, so in relation to its bottom anchor by 4 points. So we'll change this to 4. Its leading anchor is still fine. The height was different, I think. Yep, a height of just 16. But its trailing anchor is also just fine. So now that we have that, we can come up here and we'll set this text. And we'll build and run it and see that on the screen. Every time I add a new UI element, I like to build and run it just to make sure that things look the way that I would expect them to. Instead of trying to build everything and then build and run it and see a whole bunch of errors. I feel like this is a better way to go. So I think it's showing up there in the right spot. It's looking good. Let's add our primary text here. So this is going to be 14 down from the profile photo and inset just 14 points on each side. It looks like it's going to be limited to just 2 lines of text, which is important as we go through and set the constraints up. So let's do that now. We'll say private let primary text label is equal to a UI label. And again, we can copy this code here again just to try to save us a little bit of time. Primary text label, and then we'll replace these and then change the properties as they need to be changed. So we know this needs to be here. Let's take a look at our font. Our font is 19 and it's regular. Our text color is just our primary text color, and we'll add it to the view. The top anchor is going to actually be below our profile image view, and I believe it was by 14 points. Yep. And then the leading anchor will be the container view's leading anchor by 14, and the trailing anchor will be the container view's trailing anchor, but again by 14. Now, on this label, we're not going to set a height. We're going to just let it automatically expand based on how many lines of text there are. And the way that we do that is with 2 properties. The first is the number of lines. We want this to be limited to just 2 lines of text. The second property is the line break mode, and this is going to be by truncating the tail, so that if it's really long, it will add these 3 dots automatically for us and truncate it. So that's all we need to do for the primary text label down here. Let's go ahead and add it here. Primary text label dot text equals, and we'll just copy our text here. And I'm just going to write some halt and will never happen again. Let's see, we're trying to make it longer than 2 lines so that we can actually see the truncating in effect here. So that looks good. So it's limited to just 2 lines, just like we wanted, and it automatically adds our 3 dots at the end there if it's too long. So the cell's really coming along. Let's keep going and add the rest of the features that belong on this cell. So the first one is going to be this indicator here that shows how many people or how many comments we have on this particular post. So this is a new color, it looks like. So we'll copy that and we'll pop over into our assets folder. Create a new color set. Let's make this our secondary text color. We'll select any appearance, we'll select show color panel, and we'll paste the hex value right in there and hit enter. We'll copy the name, go into our UI color.swift, and we'll type in a new case statement for our color. Just like that. Now we can use it in our code. So let's go ahead and create our label. So this will be our number of comments label, and it will be a UI label. Yep, so we have number of comments label. And again, we could copy what we have going on here. I think I'm actually going to copy our time label. I think it just fits a little bit better for what we're doing now for this particular one. So the number of comments label, and we'll then replace all these here. Oops. The only thing you need to be careful of when you're copying and pasting is that you're copying and pasting the right thing, and that you definitely go through every line of code and make sure that you need it and that it is correct. Don't always assume that it's just going to be correct when you copy and paste it. So it looks like we are going to need this. Let's take a look at our font size. It says it's 14 medium. So we have 14. This needs to be medium. Our color should be our secondary text color. And now our top anchor, it should sit just below here by 12 points. And that's our primary text label. So our primary text label, bottom anchor by just 12 points. And then our leading anchor, I believe it's still 14. So we're good there. I'm not going to actually set a trailing anchor for this one. And our height was 16. So that looks good. Then up here in our number of comments, dot text, we can say, I know is that, yep, just like this. We build and run that, and that should show up on the screen. Uh-oh, something doesn't look right. We would have expected it to be left aligned, but it's not because the constraint is referencing the profile image view instead of the edge of the screen. So that's what I was just talking about, how important it is to look at your code, and why I like to build and run it every time I add a component so that I can see if it's actually showing up in the right place. There we go. That looks right. Okay, the next thing we have on the screen is this line. And it looks like it's our primary text color with an alpha of 10. It has a height of 1, and it looks like it expands to the edges, and it's down by just 10 points. So let's go ahead and add that here. Delimiter equals a UI view. I like to call this separator actually. And we don't have this yet, so I'm just going to have to write it new here. So we're going to set translates auto resizing mask into constraints equals to false. We'll set the background color equal to UI color dot color primary text color with an alpha component. This was at just 10% of our primary text color. Yep. And that's all the properties we need to set on it. So I'll add it to our container view. Then we need to set the constraints. So this is going to have a top, left, right, and height constraints, or top, leading, trailing, and height. So we'll have this top anchor. Our constraint is going to be equal to the bottom of our number of comments label. Actually, there is a use case where this might not show up if there's no comments yet. But we could always say be the first to comment or something like that on there. So yeah, we'll just set it relative to that. So this will be the number of comments label dot bottom anchor, and the constant is 10. It's going to be down 10 points from the bottom of our number of comments label. And then in the separator, we'll do the left, we'll do the leading anchor. You might say, what's the difference between the left and the leading anchor? If you are like if we, let me finish this out. We can, there's no constant on here. It's just going to be straight to the edge. So on our leading anchor, if we push option and click on it here, so this is, it has to do with auto layout and its anchors. If we change this to left anchor, I believe it might have something to do with where you're like internationalization. So some cultures and countries, they read from like right to left, versus like in the United States, you read from left to right. So I would prefer to just go with leading rather than left, so that way there's no confusion around like if it's in a different language or a different country, that it still works as expected. So that's the difference between the two, in my opinion. I could be wrong on that, but that's my understanding of it. Okay, so we'll set the trailing anchor equal to the trailing anchor of the container again, so it fills the whole space. And the last is the height anchor. This is going to be equal to a constant of 1. And we don't need to add it up here because we're not setting any properties. It's just an empty view to have a line for us. So we'll go ahead and build and run this one. We're getting close here to finishing up this cell. So I think that looks good. It goes all the way across the screen like we would expect. The last thing for us to do is to add these images with this text. And we'll go ahead and do that now. So these we can just export. And then we can just put them in our assets folder. And they should show up here in a second. There we go. Comment icon and our share icon. So, well, let's do our comment icon first. This will be an image view. And we'll go ahead and set that up down here. For this one, we want it to fit. We don't want it to fill the entire image view. So we'll say scale aspect fit on this one, and then we're going to set the image itself as well. And the reason we aren't going to do it up above is because it's never going to change. It will always be the same icon no matter what content we try to put on the cell. So that's why we're going to set it down here. So there's the comment icon, and then we're going to add it to the view here, or our container view. And then we need to set our constraints. So based on the image itself, it looks like it is 14. Let's zoom in a little here. 14 all around. So the top, left, and bottom are all 14. So we'll say comment image view dot top anchor. This is going to be equal to the bottom of the separator by 14. The leading anchor is going to be equal to our container view dot leading anchor as well, and it will also have the inset of 14. And then our bottom anchor is going to equal, let's see, the bottom of the container view as well with negative 14. And then we also want to set our width and our height. These are just going to be equal to constants. Looks like the width is 23 and our height is equal to 20. That's what it looks like here in our document. So now we still had that extra line of code here. I think we can take that off now. Let's try and build and run this and see how it looks. So the reason why we had to have that before is because we didn't have a bottom anchor set on our view at all. But now we do. So because we have a bottom anchor set and these items all have a height property or an automatic height set based on how big that label gets, it will automatically fill the cell and expand it to the right height that it needs to be. And in fact, we can see that in action if I'll just delete this out of here. If we were to change our text so that it's only like a single line, for example, all the cells automatically resize to fit. So all your spacing stays the same and everything. You don't have to do any weird manipulation to make your cells change height based on their content. It'll just happen automatically for you. So you can see we just have a single line of text, but we still have the same amount of spacing above and below it. So that's how you achieve that effect. So, okay, so we've got the comment image view. Let's get our label there. Now, you might be asking, why are we using a label instead of a button? Wouldn't it make more sense for them to have a button to click on? And the answer to that is yes, it would. However, we want to put a button over the entire text and image. You could put these both inside of a UI button and try to mess with the insets. I choose not to do that because it's a little bit more work than I feel like it's worth. Instead, I just use a label, an image, and then I put a transparent UI button over the top so that when they click on that, either over here or over here, they'll both work. So you just don't get that effect of like it fading briefly before it comes back to the full color, which for me, in my opinion, is just fine. So let's go ahead and add our comment label here. And we're going to, okay, so looks like our font is our primary font with an alpha at 60%. It's a 17 medium font. Medium here. The text color equals our UI color, and this is our primary text color with an alpha component again of 60, looks like. But that's not going to work. This needs to be 0.60. And then comment label dot text will equal comment. And again, we're setting this here instead of up in our configure function because the text will never change. So then we'll add this here, container view dot add subview. This will be our comment label that we add. And then we just need to set the anchors on it. We're not going to set a width, but we will set a height. And we don't need to set a bottom. So we really only need, if we were to copy all of these, we don't need our bottom or our width. So we can get rid of those two constraints. The height is going to be 20. So let's go ahead and replace these values here. The height is fine. The leading anchor will change, as well as our top anchor actually will be the same. It will still be 14. So we just need to change this leading one here. So it will actually just be 6 points away from the trailing anchor of our comment image view. So if we build and run that, I believe we'll have the comment text showing up where we would have expected it to. Looks good. Yep, right where we wanted it. And comparing that to our mock-up or our design here, it's looking pretty good. It looks like the last thing we need is our share button. So let's go ahead and add that now. So it looks like it's 28 points away from the comment. So the first thing we do is we add our constants up here. share image view equals UI image view, and we'll add the share label as well at the same time here. And we're just going to go ahead and copy everything we just did for comments and paste it down here. So this will be the share image view. And we're just going to replace all this stuff. And this will be the share label. Okay, so this will be the same. The name is different. We should be using our share icon name. And then we'll add it to the view. The top anchor, let's just double check everything. The top anchor is still going to be 14. We're good there. Its leading anchor, though, is going to be different. It is going to be just 28 from the trailing anchor of the comment label. We don't need a bottom anchor set here, but we do need a width and a height. And it looks like they are both 20. Okay. And now for the label, the font is going to be the same. The text is going to be different. It's going to be share. The top will be the same. But this is going to change. This should be our share image view dot trailing anchor. And it is also 6 points away. So I think we're good now. I think if we build and run this, we should have our cell all set up. And there we go. So that's how you set up a custom cell. This is again our home feed. And we're going to do something like this for every tab. We'll be doing custom cells for each one. And in a later video, we'll show you how to populate this with dynamic data. Right now, this is all just hard-coded, but we'll wire everything up so when you click on buttons and sharing and commenting and the post itself, that it'll actually do a lot more. So it's looking good, and thank you for watching.